Listen, it's just been fascinating listening to you both back and forth. There's very little for me to come in on, but I'm going to do that now at that invitation, Alexander, which is about what you said, Tom, about the financial system, and you also commented on, Alexander, how the European banks are hollow, and really how, because you have said this, Tom, how Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are going to provide salvation for people. Because I tell you, the way I see it, it's really, really bleak.
Tokemetrics is a cryptocurrency investment platform that helps users leverage machine learning to become better crypto investors. Our in-depth analysis helps eliminate the emotions of investing, find profitable investment opportunities, and filters out scams.
Take a look at this. Apollo, the most secure, simple, and easy-to-use crypto wallet. If you order now, you get 47% off. Use my affiliate link in the description below. They are doing a fundraiser on Kickstarter, and they were fully funded in 19 minutes. It uses the world's highest security certified chip, 100% offline, all the major cryptocurrencies, and over 200,000 tokens. Link in the description below. It's really big. Working as a social worker, I work with the most distressed families, the most distressed demographic of all. Children of damaged parents. They have no political clout because they're not together enough to exercise any political clout. And the lockdown's just been brutal for them. I mean, I'm okay. I work from home. I'm middle class. I've got a garden and a house and, people in there. But, for a single parent who's looking after a disabled child and there's no support from family because of social isolation, there's no charitable help. What are they supposed to do? It's just brutal. And so then with the vaccine passes coming, I am terrified. Look, I'm terrified of vaccine passes. I campaigned against apartheid in South Africa to stop the pass laws, and now we're going to have these digital passes. How are we going to go about? And then I heard a video on BitChute about some nurses who are coming out as whistleblowers about what's really going on. And one of the things they were saying about how one of their family members was refused medical treatment by the local GP because she didn't have these injections. She had to have these injections. And so then this person had to argue and fight to be treated without having to have the injections, which I'm not a fan of at all. I just think they're lethal. I have a much, much bleaker view because there's no opposition, really. There's nobody to galvanize around who's captured the spirit in the way that Jeremy Corbyn did but failed to capitalize on.
Yes,
in the way that Salvini did, but then got busted.
Yep.
So in the way that Orban is doing, and kudos to him. So I see it much, much bleaker. And then the salvation could it be Bitcoin, Monero, Pirate Chain, and how? Because if I have to have this digital pass on my smartphone and everything's monitored, like the new operating system on Mac, Big Sur, bypasses VPNs. You can't use a VPN to preserve your privacy if you've got Big Sur on your Mac.
Well, then don't buy a Mac.
Well, I'm using Catalina. I'm not updating.
Yeah. Or the other option is like, this is why privacy is going to be the issue going forward. This is why Pirate Chain popped from 20 cents to $3, right? And minting
2 cents a year ago.
Well, yeah, but I'm full disclosure, I bought it back in November at 8.5 cents. So I'm like, okay, now what do I do? I'm not complaining, but I said then, and I said and I'll say now, and which is that privacy within the crypto space will become more and more important. It's why even I think bad coins, privacy coins like Zcash and to a lesser extent Monero are doing very well, right? I think they're doing very well because of that demand, right? And so, but the bigger question is you're not going to get out of this, out of going through the suck on this. I mean, I'm going to be blunt. We're all going to have, the only way out of this is through it. Okay. The question is, what are you going to look like on the other side of it? The best we can do, or people like myself can do, and to us, and Alex, because he doesn't advise people on what to do with their money, but he does give them the information they need to make good in choices about their money. So it's incredibly valuable from that perspective. And I try to be the bridge between the two worlds, which is You have the opportunity here to create life-changing money and wealth for yourself and savings for yourself and your family on the other side of this when we come out the other side. That's where this quote unquote salvation comes from. It gives you the capital necessary to be able to barter out in and around a completely locked down system. It gives you the ability to function as an economic person and to be able to trade favors and goods and services and keep your close community, whatever part of that's left, functional. I've been saying this on my live streams, and I'll say it again. The central banks have lost when my friend Brad takes Dash for his cows, right? Because Brad only takes Dash for his cows if Oliver and Dahlman in High Springs the feed store takes Dash for their alfalfa cubes and their peanut hay. And the peanut hay farmer only can buy replacement parts for his tractors. Once that supply chain exists, once that happens at the fundamental level, food production, they've lost that's when we come out to the other side. We start the process of coming out to the other side. And the bigger question is, how much capital are you going to have to be able to become that local celebrity, to be able to be the person to capitalize the local economy? My feed store owner just found out the other day that I work for Newsmax. He was all chuffed. He's like, "Oh my God, I know that guy. Like, that's awesome." And he was yelling. He was effusive when my wife went into my goat feed. But that's how you build that connection, right? Yep. I've been his customer for 10 years. I never tooted my own horn when I went in there. I just went in, bought my stuff, said good morning, said good day, and you build your relationship. And that's what you guys, I don't know how you guys do it. We still have a normal life here in Florida. We have the exact opposite of what you have. And we can thank Ron DeSantis for this, running literally an independent country within the United States. Now the question becomes, so, what do you do, right? I don't know. But it's going to be the people who get through this, that figure it out the best. They're the ones that are going to be able to lead you out of the dark ages. And I don't know how long that's going to last. And I'm listening to you talk, Rich, I literally started to cry because I can't fathom what you guys are going through. Right. And I think it's bad here, and like life is pretty normal, but I can see behind the curtain. Right. So I don't know.
Can I just say, because in Britain, things are not easy here, but they're a lot better than they are in some parts of Europe. The person who I really cry for is my brother, who lives in Greece. And he has sent me some extraordinary emails in which he says that it's like living through a disaster film. Being in Greece. I mean, Greece is well on the way to systems collapse. But can I perhaps lighten the mood a little by talking about a country where things are, shall we say, rather more functional? And that is that the Russians, of course, imposed their counter sanctions. And I don't think the United States, it's widely known who exactly are the subject of their counter sanctions. But I have a list of them, and it's 8 people. So it's Merrick Garland, Michael Carvajal, who is the director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Mayorkas, Susan Rice, Christopher Wray, John Bolton, James Woolsey, and Avril Haines, who's the director of the National Intelligence. So it's all those people. And the other thing that they're doing, though, which is perhaps more interesting, is that as part of their sanctions, they're also closing down all the NGOs. This isn't been widely published. All of the NGOs in Russia which receive American money, and specifically which receive money from the US government. It's astonishing that those have been allowed to continue for as long as they have been, but they are doing. That's also been announced, and they seem to be taking their first steps to close down Navalny's organization. It's now been raided by the police, and its funds have been frozen, and the people involved in it have been charged. So I see all of these moves by the Russians as tidying up their internal affairs, keeping out all these awful people that I mentioned from Russia, and making it absolutely clear that interference in Russian domestic affairs from this point on is not going to be tolerated.
let's go one step further. They announced that they're going to be taking Visa and MasterCard off the table in Russia.
Oh, really?
They're booting.
Oh, really?
They're mulling. I don't know whether they've actually done it yet, but
Yeah,
that was announced a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I mean, I heard about it. I think that won't happen at once, but I think that is going to happen fairly soon, and I expect perhaps next year or fairly soon. And I think this is going to come as a shock. They're going to disconnect from SWIFT.
Oh,
they're going to take that step.
Oh, absolutely. I think. I mean, I was reading comments on the latest blog post over to the latest open discussion over at the Sakers blog, and they're all convinced that Putin's going to announce this on the 21st when he makes a speech. I don't think he's going to.
I did be soon. Do that soon, but I certainly see that coming. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting. I thought that was an interesting list of people. And
yeah, no, it was. I howled when I read that list yesterday. I was like laughing.
Susan Rice and John Bolton and all those people. I mean, and Christopher Wray.
What's fascinating about this, and now the Russians are getting their house in order, and they are moving forward with a world that they don't need the dollar, right? I mean, look, barring us from buying Russian sovereign debt. I mean, to be honest with you, I was recommending that to people 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's like, dude, you can get Russian debt at like 12%. Like, it's going to go to 4%. You're going to make so much money on it. Why wouldn't you buy them? And of course, it was a great trade. And everybody I recommended that to looked at me and said, we can still buy Russian debt. Like they never even considered buying Russian sovereign debt because they already figured that it had been broken off from us. Like, no, of course there wasn't going to be. They're not going to break it off until they're going to break off our ability to buy it until there's no profit left in it. Like, there's not much profit left in Russian sovereign debt now. They've stabilized the yield curve. It looks relatively great. I still have problems with the way Navalny runs the Bank of Russia, but she's as close to an Austrian as you're going to get. And given that Putin's in charge, it's fine. She's not great because she's IMF trained, but she's not terrible either. She's not freaking, she's not Powell. Well, actually, Powell's probably the best Federal Reserve chair we've had in 30 years, for 40 years. Because, go ahead.
She's certainly better, I think. She's certainly improved over the last 2 years or so. Can I just say, and this is a question I actually am going to ask you, Tom, when you buy Russia, when you, as an American, have bought Russian sovereign debt, whom do you buy it from? Do you buy it directly from
the Russian? You could have gotten it from Fidelity. I know that directly because I did recommend it to people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I can go to Fidelity. I can buy Russian debt." So you could buy Russian OFCs or whatever they're called.
OFCs.
Yeah. You can get, because as long as you have a broker that does international trading, and Fidelity is one of them, and Schwab is another. I think it's funny. I've been recommending stocks recently that are kind of like not stocks, but ETFs that are kind of off the beaten path. And some of the I get feedback from some of my subscribers saying, look, I can't buy those. Like, Merrill Lynch won't let me buy those. We don't allow our customers to invest in those kinds of stocks. What do you mean those kinds of stocks? Like uranium ETFs, really? Like, seriously. So, but others like Schwab and Fidelity, no problem. So it all, there's already a chilling thing. Like, the SEC is very quietly behind the scenes putting certain stocks and certain companies on 30-day watch lists. Yeah. And then which is suspending trading in those stocks for 30 days in order to discourage people from buying them, hoping that that's somehow going to slow, like, for example, the Chinese down. I saw this with a small Chinese large cap ETF.
Because you realize that the secondary market in OFCs, you can still buy buy them.
Right. So you can't buy them directly from the Bank of Russia. I'm not
exactly.
Like, who does? But who does anyway, right?
Who does it? I was just
and there's not that many of them out there.
No, I know exactly. This is what I mean. I don't understand. I mean, the whole thing is absurd. I mean,
it is.
The number of people in the US who buy OFZs must be tiny.
Yeah, it's like 20 people. Like, how many crazy people like me would buy OFCs? Like, seriously, I only say that, and I've only ever recommended that to kind of high net worth individuals, right? Who I was like, well, you're probably the only ones who can go buy them anyway, because you have to be an accredited investor to buy something like Russian sovereign debt. Because those I can't buy Russian. I don't think if I were to put an order in for an OFC, if I had a Fidelity account, go over there, I don't think, and sanctions or no sanctions, I don't think I'd be allowed. Because I'm not an accredited investor. I'm not anybody who's gone through that process. I'm like, they're not going to let you do that anyway. So it's silly. So the marginal inflows, the amount of, all that's going to do is it's going to force the money that's been bought by, the bonds that have been bought over the last 4 or 5 years. during, from the 12 to 13% down to 4.5%, wherever they are now, those people who are sitting on massive profits, it's going to be like the Goldman Sachs's and JP Morgan's and whatnot. They're the ones that own all this stuff. They're going to dump that on the market in order to bomb the Russian ruble at a moment in time when it's important. They tried the other day when they announced the sanctions. The ruble shot up and then it immediately collapsed back because then oil shot up immediately, and then so it all just kind of played itself out in the wash. They're desperate to try and keep the Russian ruble weak on the open market, and they can't do it because it continues to strengthen because the fundamentals are strong. But the Russians are sitting there going, "Fine, continue to allow me to pay my external debts in rubles, which are 20% undervalued." Okay, great. So Gazprom will have another banner year. Rosneft will have another banner year.
I was going to say, why do they think the Russian government wants the ruble to be strong?
Right.
I mean, it doesn't. Right. It doesn't. I mean, this is right. The other thing. I mean, I find this whole thing extremely strange.
Well, no, they're trying to, Alex, if you really think about this, think about what they're trying to do. Yeah. They're trying to raise the price of oil to send the price of gasoline in the United States to $9 a gallon so that we all buy friggin' electric vehicles, while at the same time trying to send the Russian ruble to 100 at the same time, while they were a $9 billion a month trade surplus.
Yes. I mean, it doesn't make any kind of sense, and I cannot imagine. I can't think of who in the US would buy OFZs directly from the Bank of Russia. There can't be anybody who does that. I mean, the
only ones who could have bought it would be the broker dealers that would then sell them on to their customers. Again, with Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan.
Okay, a few people. But I mean, all right, a few people like that. But I mean, they're mainly bought by Russian banks.
Yes,
and financial institutions. I mean, that's by definition, that's not going to be affected. And as I said, weakening the ruble, selling off
at this point,
it's what the Russian government wants. I mean, it's a complete misunderstanding.
I've been saying this for months. I've been going like the Russians are sitting back collecting profits like Johnny Bench, like collecting fastballs. Like it's crazy. It's like, okay, so we'll keep grabbing bars of gold because you're letting me generate profits in overpriced euros. The euro at $1.20 and the ruble at 76. Those are both abominations to anybody who knows anything about currency trading. And it's truly remarkably insane.
Yes.
And I dude, I'm not dumb. Like it's like I look at this and I'm like, oh, this is the greatest currency play of a lifetime, other than Bitcoin, of course. But that's a different thing. I mean, just from a pure forex perspective, I'm like, dude, I'm buying the Russian ruble hand over fist at 77. Like I can't buy them fast. I can't. I mean, I only had to back up a whole bunch of money in my savings account to pay my taxes next month. Otherwise, I know where my money's going. Like, not to say that I'm like, dude, like the ruble at 77 is a bargain with oil at $70 a barrel. It's a literal bargain. They're giving them away.
All right, Tom, Alexander, staying with currencies. China. Sure. China's central bank digital currency with a time limit. How interesting. Yeah. And also, I saw something in Zero Hedge, I think it was today or yesterday, that they're upping their purchases of gold.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was the article I just wrote this morning for my patrons, because I took yesterday off for the most part. And I don't know why I took yesterday off. I just kind of did.
Tom, sorry. It might have been your article. I did see your article in Zero Hedge, and I thought, what a bloody great article.
That about the second one, which is about the China and gold backing and all of that. But my article I had on Zero Hedge yesterday was about the expiration of money, right? And because that article came out, because the Zero Hedge put that article out a few days ago, about a few days previous to that, I wrote a piece for my patrons. I write private posts for my patrons now on mornings when I'm not producing other work for them. I write, kind of what I call from the, just a little notebook thing to keep myself in. And so when I see something, I write up a short post on it. And then now I'm turning those into my full-blown blog posts or articles that I put out to the world. So I take, notes and put them into that. So I wrote about this, last week, and what's interesting is that this morning, what I wrote for the patrons this morning was about the China's announcement of allowing banks, giving them an allocation to buy gold now, to import gold into China. Now, it's not a lot of gold. It's 150 tons, which is not a lot of gold. What's more interesting about this is the timing, because it's been a very interesting week, if anybody hasn't noticed. We had a lot of things happen this week. We had near war with Russia and Ukraine. We already covered that. We had Coinbase IPO at a valuation bigger than any other bank in the world. right? Now, it went through a very Facebook-like opening on the stock market, opening trading, which is that Facebook debuted at $50 a share and then hit 15. If nobody remembers that, I do. I was there watching it when it happened, saying maybe I'll buy it when it's 10 because I'm an idiot and didn't buy it at 15 because, right? And everybody was making fun of Facebook at $50 at the $50 IPO, and it dropped 70%. Zero Hedge was all over it. All the gold bugs were all over. But Schadenfreude is short-lived, and the same thing's happening with Coinbase. They were all like, "Oh, it came out at 450 and dropped to 330 or whatever." I'm like, "Yeah, it should have never been valued at 450 in the first place. That's just a function of the oversubscription to the IPO, not." So that's the price they thought they could get. Now the market is telling them what the price is. It's not to say that Coinbase isn't worth $450 a share, but it's not worth $450 a share today. You have that, which Bitcoin breaks to a new all-time high. Then the Turks come out and say they're going to ban Bitcoin for all purchases. On the heels of India saying the same kind of, sorry, not sorry, ban, not ban Bitcoin a couple months ago. Read these very carefully and you'll notice that they're not banned. They just can't use them to settle transactions. But you can't settle transactions in Russia, for example, with the new crypto law, but you can buy them, right? Now I know plenty of crypto projects are actually moving out of Russia in other places because of the crypto law that's in place now, FYI. So that Russian crypto law, by the way, is going to have to be amended at some point. Mark my words, it will be. So you have all these things happen, and then China right after. So what happened when the Turks announced that they were going to ban cryptocurrencies? Oh well, Bitcoin dropped from below the previous all-time high. Also note, no one talked about this, but all the Bitcoin that were stolen in the Kraken a hack from 2017, they got dumped on the market on the day that Coinbase IPO'd as well. So all of these things tell me, along with all the stories that have been seeded about how terrible Bitcoin is in terms of mining and efficiency, in order to get the Greens to hate it and all this stuff, what's been happening? The central banks are losing every turn. At every moment, they keep trying to knock this down, and it keeps failing. They were able to get to the point this morning, we're trading just below the all-time high, but all that happened is people rolled out of Bitcoin. They rolled into all the high-quality alts that Rich and I talked about earlier. Moreover, what did the Chinese do? The Chinese come out and went, "Hey, everybody, we're going to allow our banking system to encourage retail investment into gold again for the first time in 2 years." Why is that important? Well, did you see what it did to the price of gold? Price of gold has been languishing, and it's been sitting there. And I chart this for my patrons twice a week on my market reports and saying, "Look what's happening in the chart." And you can see it. Gold's trying to bottom, but they're suppressing it. We need I literally said this to my patrons on Wednesday. We need to close this week above first 1750 and then 1765 for there to be a stabilization and a confirmation of the double bottom around 1670 in gold. Why? Because strategically, why are they hitting gold? Because they can. It's the only market they still of this type that they have control over. They don't have control over Bitcoin. They don't. But they control gold because 90% of the gold in the world is controlled, or 95% of it is not in private hands. So they control the stock, so they can control the flow of paper gold, which is what they do on the COMEX and the LBMA all day, every day. So now ask yourself the question: when the Chinese say, "Oh no, we're going to allow our private banking system to allocate into gold," what happened? We closed at 1775. 1775. Technically, a very important number. Why? It sets up a move back to 1800, possibly 1900, possibly 2000. Why is this important? Because you cannot continue. Who are the biggest skeptics of crypto? People our age and older.
Yeah.
That means the fund managers who still look at it as a trade. It means the family offices and the big funds, and there's not real custodial infrastructure in place for big funds to even get into Bitcoin. And there's all these guys, the Peter Schiffs, the Nouriel Rubinis, now the Nassim Nicholas Talebs, and all the rest of them. They're all out there saying it's just a scam, it's a this, it's that. The old economy money. What I said in the end of my article the other day, when the over 55 Gen X boomers, over 55 Gen Xers and the boomers finally get past the idea that central banks and coercion are as a valid monetary system, they're going to be buying gold in droves. But what they needed was the signal. Because suppressing the gold price the way they have has kept those guys on the sidelines thinking that Bitcoin is just a pump and dump in another tulip bubble. But the real scenario is that the central banks are in control because they've got gold under control. What happens when they lose control of gold? So that's the timing that you're looking for. That's the signal that matters. Okay. That's the situation as I see it right now. All the events of this week, I'm so happy we did this. We waited to do this until Saturday because then we got to see all of the market shenanigans for the week because it all coalesces in the big picture, which is they're scared to death. When Lagarde comes out and says, "Oh, you should back the euro because it's backed by the ECB and it's trusted," by whom? By whom, Christine? The very people I just said who are still wedded to a system where the central banks can control the price of gold. But once they see the price of gold get out of their control, that's when things change. This is why the Fed refuses to make any moves. This is why the Fed has been tightening dollar liquidity, even though we're spending all this money that they raised last year. Now they're finally spending it. So we're going to see a boom in the United States, in the domestic markets in the United States, but the world is still terminally short dollars, and dollars are still needed overseas. That's why the dollar refuses to really break down. And they're desperate to keep the euro high, because if they don't keep the euro high, then European sovereign debt yields blow out to the upside. And guess what? German sovereign debt, go look, just watch German 10 years. The ECB has been trying to keep it below minus 30 basis points now for about 3 months, and it keeps failing. Now, this week, I think it closed at negative 27 basis points. It's 2 weeks in a row now above negative 30. It's going to go, when the German 10-year gets back to 0%, they have a problem, because they don't have control over it anymore. So then the euro starts to fall and everything else. Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you very much, Tom. Alexander, anything you want to say about Chinese buying gold?
Well, the China, this is a world that finance currencies are not so much my type of thing, but I think that whatever it is that the Chinese are doing, it is clearly purposeful and it is clearly designed, and they're clearly working hard to create their own financial system, independent of those of the West. And I think this is now becoming a priority for the Chinese government. If you listen and read what the Chinese media is saying, that is their major concern now. And I suspect the digital currency thing is part of that. What I was waiting for Tom to say, and I'd be interested also to hear what you have to say about this Chinese digital yuan. Why is it time limited? I still haven't understood this.
Oh, okay. It's not that it is time limited. They're going to leave themselves the option to make it time limited, because currency with an expiration date is always like the last resort of a tyrant. Like when their monetary system has failed and people are hoarding currency because they don't know what else to do because they're scared of the future, then you have to induce people into spending. So first thing you do is you lower interest rates to zero, then you lower them negative. And then when that doesn't work, you put an expiration date on the money and force them to spend. And so it's a backdoor for them to make sure that they can do and they can control it. Because remember, MMT, modern monetary theory, is all about controlling the supply of the money based on tax rates and stock and flow. And they want to have complete control over that. So the expiration date is it's one of those things where of course it's going to have an expiration date. Just like of course you're only going to be able to buy certain things with it. Right. I got news for you. When we have a digital dollar, do you really think we're going to be able to go and buy guns with our digital dollars? No. Okay, they're going to be glorified EBT cards. Okay, so same thing. It's same kind.
I did wonder, because of course the whole point. Currencies are two things. They are both an asset. They can be both an asset. You can put it in your bank and it's there, or that's the classical way. And they can obviously be a medium of exchange. It does seem to me a little bit. And I have to say, it's a bit mischievous here, but whether perhaps this Chinese digital yuan isn't a kind of Chinese form of QE, actually.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course it is. Yes.
It's domestic QE. It's also there. Absolutely. Alex, you're 100% correct. Sometimes there's so much to talk about. There's so many angles on a story like this. And when I write a big piece about this, I have to focus on one aspect of it. And, ultimately, I got to focus on the global international asset, because to me, that's the thing that everybody's missing. But of course, a digital yuan is absolutely a way to increase the liquidity of the internal economy of China at a time when access to overseas capital may be being diminished. And at the same time, of course, we have now 3 different yuans. We have the internal yuan, we have the digital yuan, and we have the external yuan, right? We have the CNH, we have the CNY, and now we're going to have the DCNY, right? So,
but Tom, with the time limit, that will kill savings and investment, and that will kill growth.
It's a terrible thing. That's exactly what I said the other day. That's why they'll never be able to get it into the hands. No one will intercept it for international trade unless they're absolutely forced by American stupidity, raising the cost of using dollars so high that people are even willing to use a currency that has a threat of the Chinese Communist Party saying you got 3 months to spend it.
But even domestically, no one would want to use it.
I agree.
You buy goods off me with that. What am I going to do with it? It's got 2 days left. That's the point I was trying to make in my thing, is that people may not be very smart with how they spend their money, right? I mean, we make bad decisions with our money all the time. How many people are out there driving $60,000 SUVs? They can't afford it because they can get they can get a 7 or 8 year loan on the thing, and they don't care. It's terrible. They're losing $30,000-$40,000 on this car, but if it's been abstracted away from them, if the loss has been abstracted away, then they make bad decisions with their money on a time value basis, because people aren't particularly good with the time value of money, but they are good with understanding in the moment what to do with their money, which is, oh, that guy's selling me gas for 3 cents less than that guy, I'm going to that guy, right? And and we're really price sensitive to the stuff we pay. We buy all the time, the stuff that matters to us: gasoline, food, and energy, our internet bills, our cell phone bills. Those are the things we care about. All the investments and stuff, we don't understand the time value of money. I say this all the time. Poor people are poor because they don't understand the time value of money. If people understood how to maximize the time value of their money, they wouldn't make 90% of the decisions they make. But guess what? The central banks are bound and determined to corrupt your ability to properly parse the time value of money, because they make money on corrupting the time value of money.
Yeah. This is actually a very important point, because you're absolutely right that China has an external yuan and a domestic one, because of course I've been there, I've seen it like that myself. And one of the things you realize when you're in China is that this is a very artificial monetary system. And it seems to me that it's just become a bit more complicated and a little bit more artificial, because you now have 3 different yuans all operating simultaneously and in parallel. I wonder how long that can go on for, and what the consequences will be when it doesn't work anymore, because sooner or later it won't. I mean, these kind of systems are not viable. I mean, if you had a digital version of your actual currency, that I can understand. That I can understand. I mean, I can understand. I'm not comparing that with Bitcoin. I'm talking about,
of course not,
a currency that you can transmit it via an app. You don't have to go through a bank. You don't have to worry about.
But you can still remit it for physical cash.
Exactly. That's a completely different thing. This, it seems to me, is a very odd creature indeed. And I do wonder what the point of it is, and whether it doesn't actually hint at some underlying weaknesses.
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. The whole purpose of the Chinese are there first because of the belligerence on the geopolitical and the dissolution of diplomacy, right? The ending of diplomacy, and they had to go there first. But the truth of the matter is that's the plan for Europe. The digital euro is absolutely the only way they're going to consolidate all the debts under the rubric of the ECB, issue consols. It's 0.25% or 0.5%, steal everybody's money and hand you digital euros on your smartphone, and then put you all on UBI and hope that doesn't cause a revolution. That's what they're hoping for. They're hoping that they can create a brave new world, and they want to turn us. The goal of the WEF's future is for the world to look like WALL-E, the Disney movie WALL-E. We're all fat, sitting on our television sets with UBI, drinking soda, watching endless porn on this thing, while the robots clean up the world. The mess we've left behind. That's their version of that's the 4th industrial revolution. By the way, Putin said that's insane and that's stupid, that's silly, and it's not going to work. Xi effectively said the exact same thing. I think in many ways that they're being forced into this because of Western belligerence. So this desire the endless desire by the West to impose extractive colonialist models on the rest of the world, and the Europeans, be it the Klaus Schwabians or their ancestors their cousins that live and run the United States. Okay, same extractive mindset. It hasn't changed. I keep saying this. When you watch the way we craft policy, both at what the U.S. leads, but the EU is absolutely all in lockstep with it. They just want the U.S. to be looked at as the bad guys. Well, they're the ones. Oh, we have to go along with it. Really? No, we really have to. Not nonsense. Pull the other leg and play jingle bells. You guys are the ones actually setting this policy. You're using the United States now to export that policy, and the extractive colonialist mindset has not changed one bit. That from the 14th century, that has not changed. That's what the IMF is about. It's what the World Bank is about. It's always been an extractive colonialist mindset. Period. And that which we cannot extract from, we will paralyze. Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Russia, Eastern Europe, China. That's why we're in North Korea. That's why the geopolitical chessboard looks the way it does. Nothing has changed. And the Great Reset is the last gasp of European extractive colonialist feudal lords, hereditary feudal lords, to regain control of the world. And I firmly believe that these people, because they have not paid for the price of their. They have not personally paid.
No.
Europeans have paid, Americans have paid, Chinese have paid, Russians have paid, Jews have paid, everybody's paid. They haven't.
No.
And they don't think that, and they don't think that they're going to if they start a freaking war this time, which is why I'm so thoroughly convinced there's going to be a war. So the whole system is irreparable at this point. And the only thing to go to next is to unmoor money from any opportunity cost of producing new monetary units. We went from gold, where we had to mine gold out of the ground as the opportunity cost to create money. Then we went to debt, and we used debt as the opportunity cost. We have to issue debt at a market rate based on our ability to tax our countries. That's going away. They just want to be able to create new money units with no opportunity cost whatsoever. And I don't know necessarily. The Chinese are giving out mixed signals. They're buying gold, but they're issuing a digital yuan. Like that's the mixed signal.
Yeah.
Now they're doing it for very specific reasons today. I don't believe that if they issue a digital yuan with an expiration date, to me that's like the biggest signal that the CCP is nearly as powerful as everybody thinks they are.
I have to say that is exactly what I did wonder, because it's not an asset. It can't be if it's got an expiration date. It can't be an asset. The whole point about money is it's an asset. It's exactly what Rich said. Why would you sell something in return for something that is going to disappear? It doesn't make much sense.
I mean, the gold bugs make the argument about Bitcoin all the time that we can have an EMP and your money goes away. I'm like, well, yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't. I mean, the point is Bitcoin. All right. I mean, all right. You could predict a catastrophe scenario for Bitcoin.
But at that point, gold has no value either. Lead has value.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. I mean, that's the fundamental difference. If this thing has a expiration date built into it when it's issued, then that is already a massive vote of no confidence in it. It tells you this thing one day is going to be worthless. It's not going to even exist. So what's the point of it?
And Tom, what I like is how you say often is that in that sort of instance, people, the opportunity and the value from using alternatives, they become more profitable.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it becomes more valuable to use Bitcoin and Pirate Chain and Monero and that kind of setting. So we can have a scenario, because there was an article in Zero Hedge about the Zaire, where Mobutu was printing loads and loads of Zaires, and then he issued a new Zaire. And then what happened, they stopped printing the old one, and people stopped using the new one because it was being printed away, but they went back to using the old one because it wasn't being inflated away.
Exactly. This is the thing. At the end of the day, people will market. People are smarter than, how many times do I have to say it? You may be the smartest guy in the room, but you're not smarter than the room, right? Like, people are smarter in the aggregate. That's why we do what we do. We're smarter in the aggregate than any Bond villain, wearing German eugenicist who thinks he can just pull a lever and run the world. Screw that guy. Like, we are smarter than that, and invariably this is why. Like, we have a bad. It's like there's like two forces in the world. You have people who are bad with the time value of money. At the same time, central planners have a pretense of knowledge, and those two things meet, and we get the mess that we call politics today. Because at the end of the day, people don't care. I mean, they really don't care how many monetary units they have. All they really care about is how much it buys them. Yeah. I mean, we can get used to a deflationary environment very quickly if our purchasing power is constantly increasing. Now,
Yeah.
we would
What
prefer
makes Bitcoin so attractive?
Right. Oh no, I mean, and this is the thing. I mean, people. I mean, even sophisticated arguments against Bitcoin are ultimately really dumb. Like they're really dumb, and I keep pointing them out to people all the time. Comment on my blog, or I write a new article explaining all of it again, or I make fun of Peter Schiff on Twitter or whatever. And I don't care anymore. I literally don't care, because this fight against the central banks is too goddamn important for people to get stuck in their ideological blind spots. Like I tell gold bugs all the time. I'm like, I don't care. You don't have to love it. You're not marrying Bitcoin. You can buy it, because the last time I checked, APMEX takes friggin' Bitcoin for gold. If you love gold so much. So buy some at 8,000 when I told you to, sell it at 64, and go buy 8 ounces more gold than 8 times the amount of gold you would have bought 6 months ago. And then be happy with yourself. And then you go, okay, now do I have enough gold at this point? At some point, the law of diminishing marginal utility takes over, and you say, I don't need any more gold. I've got enough of it. Like, and then I need other things. Like, eventually there's going to be a point where I don't want cryptos anymore, and I'm going to want an addition on my house. I'm going to want a new fence, right? And this is what these things are there to provide for you. And they're also to provide the ability for you to then strengthen your local community. And this is the part that we all that are involved in the space have to get through, that we have to become better at communicating that through our individual action, we create community. This is the fundamental political failure of the Libertarian Party and of libertarians in general. And I make this argument. I'm at that point. I'm like, you have to make the argument to people that by you pursuing your individual bliss, you make that guy's life materially better. And then that guy in turn makes somebody else's life materially better. And then, and that's what builds your community. And now you're doing this all the time. Getting back to my feed store owner, who's like, oh my God, this guy that I know writes for Newsmax. Isn't it great? I'm like, yeah, okay. Dude, I'm still going to buy goat feed off of you because you've always treated my family well, and you stock the brand of goat feed I like, and yada, yada, yada. And, and you've got a good price on it. But, and I know that act keeps you in business. And that's what we need to do. And we need to become better at this and explaining it from this perspective. And even if it's in purely qualitative terms, because this is how we're going to get out of this trap that they've set for us. And I've made it now my life's mission to explain it in crypto in these terms, because it's the way out for even if individual projects are scams or individual projects fail, even if Bitcoin ultimately turns out to be incapable of doing the job long term, which I think it is. But in the meantime, it being rock stupid technology, like really dumb blockchain technology, is its greatest asset right now. Yep. Because it's simple. It's easy to understand. Once somebody understands a proof of work blockchain, they get it, and then they can buy with confidence, and they can look and they can see the history of it. And that creates permanency, creates primacy in their mind. It creates validity in their mind. It's not a complicated proof of stake mixed hybrid. That's for the eggheads like me.
And for Alexander. Alexander, any last comments? I'll go to you, Alexander, and then say if there's anything else you want to say before we finish up.
Well, I still don't think there's going to be a war. I have heard all the talk.
And I certainly hope you are correct, my friend. I so thoroughly think that.
Yes, I mean, I have to say, I think the Klaus Schwabs and all these people, I mean, they're certainly very strange people. I mean, they're extremely strange people. They don't seem to be suicidal people, which is, I think, what this would require. But we will see. Certainly the times are very, very, very interesting. And of course, we have a president in the United States who is not in control. And that's become so clear. I mean, I think that at some level, there are some people in Washington who want at least to try and find some way of calming the situation. But it's quite clear that he is not in control. He's not in control of the factions. He is just on top of it. And I found this poem, which I found incredibly interesting, and it reminds me so much of the man who is, in theory, the president of the United States now. And it goes, yesterday upon the stair, I met a man who wasn't there. He wasn't there again today. Oh, how I wish he'd go away. And it seems to...
Oh, that's beautiful. Who wrote that?
I don't know. It's Canadian apparently, but it might be a folk. It might be a folk thing. But I mean,
okay, yeah, no, it's
I mean, and that, it seems to me, is the most dangerous part of this whole situation at the moment. I mean, I talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis and how this looked a little bit to me like something like the Cuban Missile Crisis, but JFK was by no means a wonderful wonderful person that so many people think he was. But he was the president. He was a real human being. He was in charge. He was able to communicate to Khrushchev. He had the back channel to the Soviet ambassador in Washington. They were able to talk and do a deal, and he was able to enforce that across the US government. With the man who isn't there trying to do any of those things, and that, it seems to me, is the most dangerous thing in this situation. Because one of the effects of all this globalization, of all these things that Tom has been talking about, is that it is inimical to the emergence of politics, because it doesn't want politics. And without politicians, there is no control. When I say politicians, I mean political leaders. You don't have a president who is ultimately accountable if the president that you have is an empty suit, who's not really in for re-election, because re-election doesn't even have any relevance anymore, because he's not making the decisions. And no one who's going to replace him is going to make the decisions. Then the bureaucracy is out of control.
Yes.
You can find yourself in a very easy situation where somebody is going to do a completely lunatic thing, where some middle-ranking person, a Colonel Vindman. Do you remember him? Colonel Vindman?
Yes.
Who was in charge of US policy on the National Security Council to Ukraine. And we only found out that he even existed when he plotted against Donald Trump and triggered a whole impeachment process. If people like that, if there's no check on them, there is no knowing what they can do. So I don't think there's going to be a war, but I don't think the situation, the danger of the situation, can be underestimated, because whereas in the past there were leaders who could control things, there's no one like that around anymore. It can be done at a level in the bureaucracy which we don't even know about, by people whose names we've never heard of.
That's right.
And that is an exceptionally dangerous thing. And that is the situation that globalization, Klaus Schwab and his myrmidons have created for us.
Yes. And they did it on purpose.
Oh, yeah. Of course they do. Yeah.
And
Well, they don't want strong leaders.
No.
Strong leaders are it's the point I always make. The EU doesn't want strong governments. It doesn't want strong national. They want bureaucrats. Yes. Because a strong government in Rome or Paris or Berlin is going to undermine the power of the center. So it creates weak governments with a weak center. It's not libertarian because it's actually very authoritarian.
Oh, it's completely
it is creating chaos and dysfunction. And that's why we have a situation where over the last few months, we've had all these crazy decisions, deploying armies to the conflict line in Ukraine, sending ships to the Black Sea, getting Erdogan to equip the Ukrainians with drones. A crazy idea, by the way. And all of those things.
But by the way, if there is a kind of General Ripper moment, and Putin doesn't fall for it, those Turkish drones will be the thing that gets wiped out.
Absolutely.
And in the parallel aggression scenario, like the shooting on the Eland plane, wiping out the British SAS in Daraa, same parallel aggression thing. Putin will wipe out the Turkish drones because they're not technically NATO assets, because they're owned by the Ukrainian. They're owned by the Ukrainians, so he can get away with that. And that would be a perfect way to let everybody know it goes no farther than this. We will shoot down all your drones. And oh, by the way, this is our capability for doing so, because they're already down, and they were down, and you didn't even know they were down until they were on the ground.
Absolutely. I mean, they're a grossly overrated thing anyway. But I mean, that's putting all that aside.
Sure.
They've been talked up to a ludicrous level.
Right.
And there are a lot of people, Zelensky, for example, who probably believe in all of this.
Well, yeah,
he doesn't know anything exactly. So that creates an enormously dangerous situation when you have no one in overall charge. When you have vast armies and vast fleets moving around. I mean, in 1914, there was the Kaiser, there was Nicholas II, there was Sir Edward Grey in London, and they still messed up. This time, there is, to all intents,
we have bozos.
No one. What are they?
Bozos. We have people who aren't even good fodder for late night comedy routines on the talk show circuit. That's how bad they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have Ursula.
I mean, I don't know whether Van der Leyen.
I would say just thank goodness for Putin.
Yeah.
holding it all together.
Because if it wasn't for Putin, if anybody less stable than Putin was in charge of Russia, we would have already had it. We would have already had it.
I agree with that.
Less stable, less smart,
less capable.
Yep. Okay, Tom, Alexander, thank you so much. This has been absolutely riveting, enjoyable as ever. Really, really grateful to you both for taking the time out to have this discussion.
Of course.
And it's been really enjoyable for me just to sit back and let the conversation flow and evolve and go where it goes. I'm going to have the links to your channels in the description below. You have to follow them on their channels and on their websites for the smartest analysis going. And I look forward to having you back on again at some point soon. And for anybody who's watching, please keep filling your, I know this hasn't really been much about crypto, but nevertheless, keep filling your pockets with crypto profits. This is Crypto Rich and Crypto Alexander and Crypto Tom signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.